Come on. Why don't you... Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for being here with me tonight.
Thank you very much again, Robert, for having me, and blessings to all those who come and visit with us and listen to the stories, because we greet you with the love and the honor of the infinite Creator. And we always pray that y'all are doing as well as possible in these crazy times. So sit back and have a good evening, and we'll tell you, and there's 2 stories for tonight. And Robert's got something queued up, so let's hang out together, eh?
That's right. I see you're all duded up with a hat tonight. That's cool. Cool beans. See, you got your storytelling cap on. You diggity dog. I love it.
Yeah, this hat has been on many an adventure over the years. I've had this hat for a bunch of years, so yep, storytelling hat.
That's right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Scotty Boy's in the house, F Kitty, and all you guys out there listening, driving home from work or wherever you might be. Well, just have a good night and listen in, because we got a great story for tonight. We're going to be talking about this famous guy, Simon Girty, who you probably never heard of. Kind of faded away into history. And, but he served in all these. He was quite the character. He was everywhere. He was quite famous, and he did a little bit of everything. He knew everybody, apparently. Fought in a lot of wars. Was part. And here's a big thing. You know, we're supposed to be talking about the Indians, but. So why are we talking about Simon Girty? He's obviously not an Indian. And, but we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, because Simon Girty was adopted by the Indians. And back in the day, he was captured as a young child and was taught their language, adopted into the Indian culture and the Indians themselves there, and became part of the tribe. And from then on, he was more Indian-based person than he was white man. Put it that way. He may have been white, but he knew no less than 9 Indian languages of the Algonquin culture. So even though he could not read and write English, he could still speak 9 languages, which made him a very valuable person when you went somewhere or did something. And he did serve as an interpreter. But now for the big twist. This is the big twist. We're going to take you back to yesteryear, way back. We're going a long ways back. Simon Girty was born November 14th, 1741. And
Long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, back when, and so, okay, of course, I always have good pictures to show you, and so let's see, of course, I got to present stuff, share screen, and we'll share screen.
I wonder what kind of camera they had back then.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They portray him. You see a picture of him, and this is what they show. You know, a big, strong white man, you know, with his rifle in his hand, and he's Mr. Tough and stuff. But he looked more like this man here. There's his picture there. You know, kind of skinny in the face, tall, strong looking, probably a thinner, just a real tough man, you know, probably wearing some sort of Indian outfit uniform type thing. And as you can tell by this picture of him from back in the day, he's carrying his black powder rifle, his flintlock rifle with the bayonet on it, probably from British bayonet type thing. He doesn't have like a cowboy hat on. He's got a wide brim hat, kind of like you got on, a wide brim hat. He has a strap on, and he's got a pistol stuck in his side, and it looks like a rope, and he's carrying a sword. And, that's why the Indians used to call them the long knives, So anyway, and here he is. That's the character we're talking about tonight. If you really get into it, this is the character when they try to write a book or something that they portray. I don't think he looked quite like that. Do you?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, they got all the stuff right. He probably had a leather coat or whatever. He had the black powder rifle, a flintlock rifle, whatever. They did paint or put a bandana on him, and that's to signify something later we'll talk about, which he did wear a bandana, and they called him a renegade. He was like, considered an evil guy for a very long time, and we're going to find out why he was considered such a evil guy. Okay, so he was born in 1741. He lived a long time. He lived up to 1818. He was 77 years old when he died. But around 1750, his parents, his father named Simon Girty, he moved out to the Ohio Valley. And here is a picture of the states. And we got a lot of pictures tonight, people. Sorry about all the pictures. But anyway, we got a picture of the United States. Now, here you go with the colonies. And remember, this is in the early 1700s, mid-1700s, at 1750 or so. People were moving in. And if you lived in the borders to keep peace, this was their idea. If you lived within the borders here of Pennsylvania, Virginia, New York, and everything like that, you were supposedly safe from the Indians. The deals they made with the Indians were, we're going to stay inside these borders and not invade your land, like this Ohio Valley here. The Ohio Valley was considered, the outreach. And you got the Mississippi all the way over to the Mississippi River. The Ohio River kind of divided it up by the Great Lakes. And there was good land out here. Real good land. And people would go out there and stake out a homestead, which really made the Indians mad. And so what happened was they were called originally they were called the squatters. That's where it came from. They would go out there, build a cabin, start a farm on some land in the middle of the Ohio Valley, saying, yep, this is my place now. You weren't supposed to be there. So they would send people out. The government would come out there and find you and burn your house down and take your land and make you come in and charge you with trespassing and, all kinds of things like that. So you were in a world of hurt, but people still did it anyway, hoping that they didn't get caught. The Indians were getting mad because of this. Here, I got a better picture of the Ohio Valley. But anyway, so this green area here is most of these people would start out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and they would go down the Ohio River, either the north or south side of the river. You got West Virginia here, and they would sneak out of Virginia and go into this Ohio Valley, Indiana, Kentucky, and, who went to Kentucky, Daniel Boone, and they would homestead out there. Not a good idea, but his father got caught, and him and a bunch of others, they burned their houses and sent them to the fort. And when they got to the fort, Simon Girty Sr., he liked to drink. He got in a big fight with another man, and he was drunken, and they got in a fight, and the man killed him. So, the Mother Mary, she moved on and she, married another guy. His name was Turner. And we're going to read a little bit out of this book I got, just a little page out of this about Turner. And when I find it here in a second. But Turner stepped to the plate. Simon had three brothers. Their names were, or two brothers. And there was three of them together, Thomas and James. And as they went along, what happened is they were they started a new family. And okay. I'm trying to find the Turner guy thing here, but anyway, Turner was caught, and Mother Mary were caught by the Indians on a raid. So the Indians came to the fort as they were doing, and they captured the fort. His parents were both caught. His father, this is going to get gruesome, people, and I hate to say it, but it's kind of gruesome. The father was caught. They tied him to a pole. The Indians took their gun barrels, heated them up in the fire, and then they pressed them on the person tied to the pole, which was his father, William Turner. So, burning him everywhere.
They were branding him.
Yes, they were branding him, exactly. Anyway, the Indians came out. They piled in. Okay, no, we're not talking about Crawford. We're going to talk about Crawford in a little bit. But anyway, so what happened is they branded him all over the place. He's crying out in pain. Eventually, somebody scalped him while he's still alive, tied to the pole, being burned with these hot, gun barrels. And then eventually they took a tomahawk and chopped him in the head and killed him dead. What a horrible way to die. Ugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, these people were unbelievably violent, but they had good reason to be, because all this land here was theirs, and they were being invaded by settlers.
Settlers. Do we know what tribe they were from? That captured him?
Yes, it was a bunch between the Mingos, the Delawares, and the Senecas. So what happened is the three boys. Simon Girty was about 15 years old, and he was taken prisoner along with his two brothers. They were the father, he was tortured. The brothers were taken. They were divided up amongst the tribes, and Simon went with the Senecas. He went with a guy named. Hang on, I got to check my notes here. The brothers were divided. He went with a Guyanaska, a Mingo, and with the Senecas. He stayed with the tribe for 7 years, and he learned 9 languages, different dialects of the Algonquin language. He was returned to the British during an exchange, which they did kind of often. They would exchange them for food or money or treaties or things like that. So the Indians exchanged him to the British. And they took him, but as soon as he was exchanged, he got away and he ran back to his Indian family. He liked his Indian. This is why we're doing the shows, because he liked his Indian family. He went back to them. He was actually exchanged during a prisoner exchange at the end of Pontiac's War. Now, we talked about Pontiac's War before, and so during this, they had a prisoner exchange. But he went back to his tribe. Now, when he got a little older, he got out of the Indians, and he went to Fort Pitt. I do have a thing about the forts right here. Maybe we can get Fort Pitt on here. Now Fort Pitt would have been like Pittsburgh. That's where Fort Pitt would be. It's Pittsburgh. So the far west side of Pennsylvania, over here. And Fort Pitt. Well, in between 1775 and 1776, which we all know what that means, the year that they signed the thing of independence, they were trying to get away from Britain. He applied to the 8th Regiment of the Pennsylvania Continental Army, but he was rejected, which kind of, made him mad. He was rejected by, he wanted to get in. He could speak all these languages. He was, trained as an Indian. He could be a great fighter. He, was all gung-ho and excited, and they turned him down and said, "Get out of here. We don't want you." For what reasons exactly, I do not know.
Probably because he had too many things on him that made him Indian.
That
like
could
a
be.
feather, or there was something that all they had to do was look at him, and he wasn't your normal pioneer. He had a headband. He had, he might have had a wampum belt. So there were things that they were like, "Ooh, he ain't a normal white guy,"
Yeah. F. Kitty says it's not like anyone else could read either. Yes, people could read. I mean, not everybody, but people could read. Literacy was really not a factor. Language, she's right, though, but speaking multiple languages back in the day was really helpful. Being an interpreter was a big thing. I want to say hi to everybody in here. We got a full house tonight. We got Scotty Boy, F. Kitty, Mossy Man. Thank you for coming. Queen Peachy Keen, is in the house. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you. Thank you all. I hope I didn't miss. Oh, Max Vision is in the house. And Babanu Solya. I guess I said that right. Babu Solya. Okay. Well, anyway, he says, cheers. Yes, he just recently subbed. Cheers. Look at that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Even though I couldn't pronounce your name correctly, I suppose. But you're here, and that's what counts, because you know what I am? I am the king of mispronunciation. David Null.
It looks like Soja.
Soja? Okay.
I think. Yeah. It's really small for me, but...
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody. There Blessings to you all.
Yes. Bamboo Soldier. Well, you're going to learn something about these guys here tonight. Anyway, Pa Joe is in the house. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.
Off the Hook and is here in the house. Thank you. Aloha. Just love that. One of these days I got to do a show about the Hawaiians.
Hey, Hook.
They're kind of native too, There's F. Kitty. Blessings.
Yeah. Oh, man. Are you talking about Hawaii?
Yeah.
Hawaii.
Native.
We basically stole Hawaii.
I know. That's what I'm saying. There's got to be a good story there.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yes, there probably is. Okay, so anyway, this is going to get gory, people, here in about 5 minutes. So listen up. If you don't want to hear the goriness, you're going to have to close your ears or turn down the sound or something like that, because it's going to get bad. Yeah. Okay, so remember, now he's trying to get into the Continental Army, and it's just not working. And so he's mad. He's mad. He did serve as an interpreter for Lord Dunmore's War in 1774, but he still couldn't get in 1775 to, be in the Continental Army. So now he's pissed off at the Americans. Remember, back in the day, we were at war with the British and the Americans. Those were the two sides out there fighting. But guess what? But
also the French were involved.
Yeah, we just got done.
The two warring factions were Britain and the newly formed America. But
yes,
there were
the French Indian War was over by this time.
Yeah,
And
but there were still French that helped out.
oh yeah. But the war between France and Britain was over.
Right.
Now it was Britain, and the British were there. So what happened is, and of course it always involves a woman. Simon Girty was in love with this gal, Mary Crawford. She was the daughter of William Crawford, who plays a big role later in life here. Okay, so he goes up to William Crawford, the father, and says, I want to marry your daughter. William Crawford says to him, no way is she marrying you. You're a loser. Get the flip out of here. Well, now he is pissed off. And you know what he does? He goes back to his Indian tribe. He sides up with the Indians and the British. Basically, he becomes a spy for the British. He rallies the Indians to join the British. And so now he's working for Britain. He wants the British to win. And he wants them to, take over everything. He don't want, the Americans, pooey on them, let Britain go. This is the thing. So here's an older map. I don't know how good you can see this, but here's our lines. 1774. You got Pennsylvania, Lake Erie up here. So all this on the other side here, the dark color, the brown, this is British land yet. The British are inhabiting it. This is the colonies, the Indian land. Britain is giving the British are giving Indians guns and weapons and organizing them. They're kind of like we are when we're helping Ukraine right now. We're going over there and we're saying, yeah, we're gonna help you organize. We're gonna give you some military equipment. We're gonna strike out the logistics. We're gonna provide you with all the things you need to fight, because we're kind of losing over here, with the colonies. We're battling these other wars. So we're going to get the Indians to help us, right? And now we move on to some of these other wars that happen. We read about Logan. And Chief Logan, he plays a part in all this too, which is, like I was saying before, this guy knew everybody. Chief Logan, his family was all murdered by some white men on one of the Ohio rivers or something like that, and which riled up the Indians. And now the Indians were pissed off because they're just getting murdered. All the treaties are being cut. Tensions are getting high. They're getting organized, and they're going out and they're burning all those houses and raiding the settlements and the forts out there. Now, some of these forts were not really much of a fort. And here's one of the old forts. As you can see, it's basically a bunch of wood pylons around, and you got a gate, and that's pretty much it. And you got a cabin in the center. There's your fort. Some were a little more elaborate, like this one here. You can see, but a fort back in the day isn't really all that spectacular. None of the big turrets, basically wood stakes to keep people out. You got some houses in the center so you can live, and a big gate. And you're trying to fight off the Indians that way, which isn't a whole lot to keep people out. You know what I'm saying? But
the only thing it's good for is folks that just sneaking up into your campsite at night.
Yeah,
they have to crawl up. They can sneak up, but they got to crawl over that.
Yeah,
that makes it a little harder.
Exactly. So Logan's family gets murdered, and Logan goes on the warpath. And Simon Girty is part of this war. He teams up with Logan. He fights with him. He rallies the Indians and gets the British to give them guns and stuff to, get Logan's war going. And Gertie knew Logan, Cornstalk. They fought in West Virginia and Kentucky. He had a really high level of trust with the Indians. They were like, thicker than mud.
But he's been with the Indians now for about 20 years, right? 15 years?
Yes.
He's been with the Indians, so they know who he is. And if he knows all those languages, then he's also able to communicate with them as a liaison between the British and the other tribes, by the way.
Absolutely.
I just want to throw that in.
Yes. Well, he was working as an agent of the British, as an interpreter for the nations, and he was also spy, and he's helping the Indians. And but what makes Simon Gertie a hero? Well, Simon Gertie he bonded with the Indians enough that when people would come into the area, he made sure that if they were captured, that they were let go, they were treated fairly. He was helping the people, the settlers, not to get killed by the Indians. Put it that way. If there was prisoner exchanges, he was the first to plead for their lives and get them exchanged and tell them just never come back here. He saved many people that way. As the Indians would attack you, apparently, going down the river. And so he set up places with his brother, who's also, part of this stuff. And he set up, and the brother would warn people going down the river, don't go down the river. The Indians are down there, get out of the way, don't go there. They're going to attack you. They're going to kill you, so he saved a lot of people like that. Let's see. So anyway, he was in this. He was doing a lot of wars. He was in a lot of battles. But at one point, there was this battle. It wasn't even a battle. There was a bunch of Indians that were captured, and I think we did a show on this at one point or another. And I'm going to try to find it here, but. So here, James, his brother, upon the banks of the Ohio, he sat to warn passengers in boats not to be lured to the shore by the arts of the Indians or of the white men in their service. This was a pure act of humanity and the conduct of Gertie on another memorable occasion. Okay, so that's how he was saving people. But it gets better. He moves on to fighting a bunch of wars. Like I said, Logan's War. He organizes the Indians, but then the Indians go crazy because at some point there was 92 Indians. They were peaceful Indians. They were at a fort, but the white man, of the fort, one of these colonels decided that, we don't need these Indians. They're just taken up and they're eating our supplies and they're just, getting in the way. They took them out back and literally they didn't even shoot them or do anything. They just knocked them all in the head. Women, children, the whole bunch. Just killed them all dead for no reason at all, just because they were taking up space. Which just inflamed all the other Indians. And again, just like we talked about with a couple weeks ago about what was it, not black elk. The one Indian where they raided his camp. They said, "You guys go camp down by the river there." And then a few weeks later, they came down with the soldiers and massacred them all. It was kind of the same thing. And so they went there and they killed all these Indians for no apparent reason, women, children. Well, the Indians got the idea that the Americans wanted to exterminate them.
They were right.
Yeah, they were right. So they
And
retaliated.
let me say something in that, you know, we talk about, well, we have talked about, you know, the war atrocities in World War II and the extermination camps and everything. And you know, the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge took some American soldiers um, there at um, I'm trying to think of the town now, but they just lined them up and shot them with machine guns. You know, they just, you know, had no um,
Yeah,
for, you know, for life, for human beings. They had no concern. You know, they're just, you know, they're just prisoners. Shoot them. Um, but my thing about that is that, you know, those kinds of things have been going on for a long time, and we blame Hitler for being the kind of person that he was. But there were people long before him that were exterminating the Native Americans. You know, they
yeah,
were exterminating other peoples. So, you know, there has been this long history, unfortunately, of extermination of other races by white people.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's happening now.
Yep.
Um, you know, let's see. Off the Hook says like it's happening in Gaza right now. It's
Yep.
still going on. You know, I mean, it's still going on. And there's Lucky Stone. Hey, Lucky Stone. Anyway, yeah. So that's how it went. Well, after that happened, all the Indians got together and they banded together because they realized you're Indian and they're not. So the Indians really hated the Americans because the Americans were encroaching on their land and the British were technically not. They were using the Indians to go out and, you know, get beaver pelts and furs and things like that. So they were kind of using the Indians, but the Indians didn't feel threatened because they weren't like building, you know, cities on their hunting grounds. You get what I'm saying?
Yep. Well, at
Okay.
least and the Indians were getting something out of it. I mean, they were trading pelts and things, but they were, you know, they were trading for guns and axes and all kinds of stuff. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't that the British were taking advantage of the Indians, but but the Indians were still getting something. They learned how to trade. You know, after a
Yeah.
while, it's like, you know, you want 5 beaver pelts for that axe. Last time it was only 3. You know, so they'd
Yeah.
haggle and end up, you know, with 4. But anyway,
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Why many natives fought for the South during the Civil War. They knew the threat of the federal government. That is so true.
yeah.
So true. Anyway, so what happened? And I got this old book. It's from 1900, and this is where I found the Simon Gertie story, and I decided to, you know, look it up and do some information on it. So we're going to read about this. There's just a couple about 3 paragraphs. I can't describe it as good as the book tells it. But if you're not into cringing and you got a weak stomach, you know, please turn down the volume for a little bit. And here it goes. In the early
And
part,
read his lips.
yes, in the early part of 1782, the incursions of the Indians became so harassing and destructive. Remember, they're destructive because they killed all those other Indians to the inhabitants of the western Pennsylvania that an expedition against the Wyandots towns was concerted, and the command given to Colonel Crawford. Remember Colonel Crawford? You know, Gertie wanted to marry his daughter, and Crawford said, "Hell no, you're a loser. Get the heck out of here!" Right? On the 22nd of May, the army, consisting of 450 men, commenced its march and proceeded due west as far as the Moravian towns, where some of the volunteers deserted. The main body, however, marched on, and with unabated spirit, the Indians, discovering the advance of the invaders, gathered a considerable force and took up a strong position, determined to fight. Crawford moved forward in order of the battle, and on the afternoon of the 6th of June encountered the enemy. The conflict continued furiously until night, when the Indians drew off and Crawford's men slept on the field. In the morning, the battle was renewed, but at a greater distance, and during the day, neither party suffered much. The delay, however, was fatal to Crawford, for the Indians received large reinforcements. As soon as it was dark, a council of war was held, and it was resolved to retreat as rapidly as possible. By 9 o'clock, all necessary arrangements had been made, and the retreat began in good order. After an advance of about 100 yards, a firing was heard in the rear, and the troops, seized with a pain, broke and fled in confusion. Now, this is the American Continental Army here. Each man trying to save himself. The Indians came on rapidly in pursuit and piled the tomahawk and scalping knives without mercy. Colonel Crawford and Dr. Knight were captured at a distance from the main body, which was soon dispersed in every direction. On the morning of the 10th of June, Crawford and Knight and 9 other prisoners were conducted to the old town of Sandusky, Ohio. The main body of the Indians halted within 8 miles of the village. But as Colonel Crawford expressed great anxiety to speak with Simon Girty, who was then at Sandusky. Remember, he was the guy who told him, "You're a loser, get out of here, you can't marry my daughter." Okay, he was permitted to go under the care of the Indians. On the morning of the 11th of June, the colonel was brought back from Sandusky on purpose to march into town with the other prisoners. To Knight's inquiry as to whether he had seen Girty, he replied in the affirmative and said yes, and added that the renegade had promised to use his influence for the safety of the prisoners, though as the Indians were much exasperated by the recent outrages, meaning all those other Indians being killed. The outrages of the whites at Gutenhunten, that's the name of the place, Gutenhunten. Upon the resisting the Moavian red men, he was fearful, and all pleading would be in vain. Soon afterwards, Captain Pipe, which is an Indian, the great chief of the Delawares, appeared. This distinguished warrior had a proposing appearance and bland manners, and his language to the prisoners was kind. His purpose, however, was bloody and vengeful. With his own hand, he painted every prisoner black as they were conducted towards the town. The captives observed the bodies of 4 of their friends, tomahawked and scalped. This was regarded as a sad prestige. In a short time, they overtook the 5 prisoners who remained alive. They were seated on the ground and surrounded by a crowd of Indians, squaws, and boys, who taunted and menaced them. Crawford and Knight were compelled to sit down apart from the rest, and immediately afterwards, the doctor was given to a Shawnee warrior to be conducted to their town. The boys and the squaws then fell upon the prisoners and tomahawked them in a moment. I mean, they killed them all. Crawford was then driven towards the village. Girty accompanied the party on horseback. Presently, a large fire was seen, around which were more than 30 warriors and about double that number of boys and squaws. As soon as the colonel arrived, he was stripped naked and compelled to sit on the ground. The squaws and the boys then fell upon him and beat him severely with their fists and sticks. In a few minutes, a large stake was fixed in the ground, and piles of hickory poles were spread around it. Colonel Crawford's hands were then tied behind his back. A strong rope was produced, one end of which was fastened a large ligature between his wrists, and the other tied to the bottom of the stake. The rope was long enough to permit him to walk around the stake several times and then return. Fire was then applied to the hickory poles, which lay in piles at the distance about 6 or 7 yards from the stake. The colonel, observing these terrible preparations, called to Gertie, who sat on horseback at a distance of a few yards from the fire, and asked if the Indians were going to burn him. Gertie replied, yes, they are. The colonel heard the intelligence with firmness, merely observing that he would bear it with fortitude. When the hickory poles had been burnt asunder, in the middle, Captain Pike arose and addressed the crowd in a tone of great energy, with the animated gestures pointing frequently to the colonel, who regarded him with an appearance of unruffled composure. As soon as he ended, a large whoop burst from the assembled throng, and they all rushed at once upon the unfortunate Crawford. For several seconds, the crowd was so great around him that Knight could not see what they were doing. But in a short time, they had dispersed sufficiently to give him a view of the colonel. Remember, he's standing there naked with fire burnt around him, tied to a pole.
Hands behind his back.
Yeah, and hands behind his back. He's got no shoes on, no nothing. He's standing there totally naked, probably burning from that fire. It's only 6 or 7 yards away or feet away or whatever it was. Okay, during this point, Knight could not see what he was doing, but in a short time they had dispersed sufficiently to give him a view of the colonel. They cut off his ears, and blood was streaming down each side of his face. A terrible sight or scene of torture now commenced. The warriors shot charges of powder into his naked body. So they're shooting their guns with no bullets, but just discharges of black powder into him. Commencing with the calves, so they started with his legs and continued to his neck. So from his legs up to his neck, they were just shooting him over and over and over. And that black powder is probably just burning the crap out of him. So now, and his face is bleeding. The boys snatched the burning hickory poles and applied them to his flesh. So now they're applying the burnt hickory poles to his flesh and burning him as he stumbles around naked, tied to this pole. As fast as he ran around the stake to avoid one party of torture or tormentors, he was promptly met on every turn by others with burning poles, red-hot irons, and rifles loaded with powder only, so that in a few minutes, nearly 100 charges of powder had been shot into his body, which had become blackened and blistered in a dreadful manner. The squaws would take up a quantity of coals and hot ashes and throw them on his body, so that in a few minutes he had nothing but fire to walk on. In the extremity of his agony, the unhappy colonel called out upon Gertie in tones which rang through Knight's brain and maddened the effect. "Gertie! Gertie! Shoot me! Shoot me through the heart! Quick! Quick! Do not refuse me! Don't you see I have no gun, Colonel?" replied the renegade, bursting into a loud laugh. Remember, the colonel was the one who told him, get out of here, you're worthless. Okay. Then turning to an Indian beside him, he uttered some brutal gestures upon the naked and miserable appearance of the prisoner. While this awful scene was being acted, Gertie rode up upon the spot where Dr. Knight stood and told him that he had now had the foretaste of what was in reserve for him at the Shawnee towns. He swore that he need not expect to escape death, but should suffer in all the extremity of torture. Knight, whose mind was deeply agitated at the sight of the fearful scene before him, took no notice of Gertie, but preserved an impenetrable silence. Gertie, after contemplating the colonel's sufferings for a few moments, turned again to Knight and indulged in a bitter incentive against a certain Colonel Gibbons, from whom he had received deep injury, and dwelt upon the delight with which he would see him undergo such tortures as those which Crawford was then suffering. He observed in a taunting tone that most of the prisoners had said that the white people would not injure him if the chance of war was to throw him into their power, but that is for his own part he should be loath to try to experiment. I think, he said, he added with a laugh, that they would roast you alive with more pleasure than those red fellows are now.
Who would roast whom now? I got lost.
Okay, so there's this Dr.
White
Knight.
people would roast the red man?
Yes, exactly. Because they were he was talking about how those people, those innocent people, got killed, and the Americans wanted to exterminate the red man, and so they knew. He says, listen, wake up, you guys would kill every Indian there is here if you got the chance, and you wouldn't even blink an eye. You would throw us in a burning pit of fire and just laugh. Okay, so, the fellows are now, okay, so broiling of the colonel. What is your opinion, doctor? Do you think they would be glad to see me? He's talking about Gertie. Still, Knight made no answer, and in a few minutes, Gertie rejoiced the Indians. The terrible scene had now lasted more than 2 hours. Now, Colonel Crawford was 62 years old at this point, believe it or not, and he'd been enduring this for 2 hours with them shooting guns at him, walking on hot coals, being burned by, wooden burning sticks, branded everywhere, blackened from his neck all the way down to his feet. And he's walking around. And his
ears were cut off.
And his ears were cut off, so he's bleeding profusely. Oh my gosh. Okay, the colonel had become much exhausted. Of course he would. He walked slowly around the stake, spoke in the low tone, and earnestly besought God to look with compassion upon him and pardon his sins. His nerves had lost much of their sensibility, and he no longer shrunk from the firebranding with which they intensely touched him. At length he sunk in a fainting fit upon his face and lay motionless. Instantly an Indian sprung up behind his back, knelt lightly upon one knee, and made a circular incision with his knife upon the crown of his head, and clapping the knife between his teeth, tore the scalp off with both hands. Scarcely had this been done when a withered hag approached with a board full of burning embers and poured them upon the crown of his head, now lay bare to the bone. The colonel groaned deeply, and he arose and again walked slowly around the stake. But why continue this description so horrible? Nature at length could not endure no more, and at late hour in the night he was released by death from the hands of his tormentors. And that was the story of Crawford. And because of that, Gertie was labeled this horrible heathen, killer guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
but the point is that Gertie did talk to Captain Pike, the chief Indian there, and he did try to spare Colonel Crawford's life. But the Indian said, "I will spare Crawford's life on one condition. The condition is that you take his place."
Right.
And Gertie was like, "Hell no."
Well, and remember, Crawford, wasn't he partially to blame for the killing of those other Indians?
Yes.
And other miscreant things, because he was a colonel. And, so that there are probably a lot of other things that happened that isn't written down. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Although in the long haul of it all, several days later, after this whole event, Dr. Knight did escape. He did make an escape. He did not get tortured and killed by all of that. He did escape from the whole thing. Now, let's see. I'm trying to read. Let me look at my notes here. So Gertie liked to drink. He was a drinker. We think he may have had a little PSTD, or what is it, post-traumatic stress syndrome going on. So he drank a lot. Remember, we picture him with a bandana around his head. As you can see here, he has a bandana around his head. Remember, I was telling you that bandana is an important thing? Yep. Well, as you know, he was a drinker and he was hanging out with the Indians. We read about an Indian named Braddock. He was an Iroquois. And Braddock was at the bar with Simon Gertie, and he was talking trash because he was drunk. Indians, when they drink, they get drunk and go crazy like. And because of that, he said some things that he probably shouldn't have said. And because he did that, well, Simon Gertie stood up and said, "Shut up." I don't want to hear it. Shut your pie hole, pretty much, right? And, well, Braddock didn't like that. He literally got up silently and walked out. But that didn't stop him from being pissed off. So what happened was Braddock went out back. He grabbed a big sword, and when Simon Gertie came out of the bar, Braddock struck him with the sword, chopping him in the head. Yeah, across the forehead there where he's got his bandana on. And cut him right to the bone, to the part where you could see his brain beating inside his head, literally almost killing him. And they rushed him away to, get doctored up. He didn't die. They bandaged him up, and they took Braddock. Braddock was heading for his horse. He was going to get on his horse and run off into the sunset because he was like, "Oh boy, what did I do?" But they caught him and said, "Listen, if you leave, we're going to come and hunt you down. And if we're going to hang you. If he dies, we're going to hang you." And so he stuck around. He sobered up. And Gertie got better, and he begged for Gertie's forgiveness time after time after time. And, Gertie got better. It took him about 6-8 months to get better. And he survived. But he had this horrible scar on his head. He had which then after that, he wore this bandana around his head to cover up the horrible scar. Later on, he did, this time he's getting older. He's fighting in still lots of battles. He is deeded some land. Yes, go ahead.
About what time frame are we in now? We're past the Revolutionary War, 1776-7,
Okay.
and
Yep.
where are we in time?
Because of this battle, we're right at the end of the Revolutionary War. This Braddock was, I mean, Crawford was captured and burned in 1782, and the Revolutionary War just kind of was wrapping up. They were signing treaties around 1783. After that, it kind of died down, and the British were still supplying the Indians with weapons, but they didn't do any fighting anymore. So this is where Simon Girty starts playing a new role as a, he's the in-between guy from the British to the Indians, the natives. He's supplying, he's organizing, he's doing all that, but he's really he's not getting the military involved, because if the British would go out there and start fighting with the Indians, that would break all the treaties.
Right. And he's like an ambassador.
Yes. So he's doing all this stuff for the Indians, and it's working pretty good, except for there was a battle, Blue Licks, which was kind of one of the last battles that turned bad. It was unsuccessful. There was many other battles just before that. One of the last battles they had one of the last battles they had was the Battle of Blue Licks, is where the Indians slaughtered, was one of the biggest downfalls of the American soldiers, where they slaughtered 600 and some Americans in a battle, because they had good, and he was part of that. He was fighting with the Indians and the British on that. But after that, the battles went down. So after 1782, 1783, the Indians were still fighting. And I can't remember what war was. It was the battle. It was the Battle of 1794. The Battle of Fallen Timbers. This was the end of the Indians' tirade. And the Battle of Fallen Timbers, the Indians were getting beaten back by the Continental Army. They had a good colonel, and I can't remember his name, but he learned from his predecessors not to get ambushed and not to be led astray by the Indians. How they would tease you and taunt you, and he was learning their guerrilla warfare. And so there was this Battle of Fallen Timbers, and he was beating the Indians, and the Indians took off, and they said, well, we can't do this. We're losing. We'll go to the fort over here, the British fort. And they ran to the British fort. And here is Simon Girty and all the British people. They're standing there, and they wouldn't open the gates. They wouldn't help them.
Where's the fort?
I can't remember where the fort was exactly. I can't.
Are they still in Pennsylvania? Is sort of my question.
No, because this would be this would be in the Ohio Valley area.
But the Western Pennsylvania's in the Ohio Valley.
It would have been Western Pennsylvania. Oh, maybe this is a better one. This is the better one. So they're fighting the boundary. So it's over here in Western Pennsylvania. There's Pittsburgh over here, Fort Duquesne, Pittsburgh, Brushy Run. I can't remember, but it's out in Western Pennsylvania, Ohio areas.
You had a picture of Pennsylvania with the forts on it. Show that one. I
can. Okay.
So one of those.
Yeah, one of those in the western area. I'm pretty sure it was one. I can't remember the name. I kind of ran out of time. But the point is that they're the Indians were coming up to the fort. They wanted help from the British. They wanted to be let in, and they They just said no, and they shut the gate, and the Indians got massacred because, here comes the army, and you guys aren't going to help us. Not a good thing. Not really a good thing.
Talk about turncoats,
Yes, well, that was the thing, because if they would have broke ranks and started to help them, they would have broke the treaty. You see what I'm saying? I know It was somewhere in here. This is, I can't remember the name of the fort off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I can't. But anyway, it was somewhere in there. It was one of those places. But anyway, the important part is that they just wouldn't open the gates. And the Indians got massacred. And that was in 1794, where at that point, Simon Girty, that was kind of one of his last stands. He says, okay, he was deeded some land by the British government in Canada over by Lake Erie. Maybe that's where I wanted to go with this. So he's deeded a bunch of land over by Lake Erie. We'll go back to this one. And so he moves there. He's got 160 acres. And here's Lake Erie right here on the edge of Pennsylvania. But he's on the Canadian side. So he's up in Canada, deeded this land. He finds a woman that he rescued from the Indians, and he marries her. And that's all good and hunky-dory. She's kind of young. He's kind of old. But he marries her, and they have a house. Everything's good. But he's still off running around trying to fight some wars and whatever and interpret for the Indians. So he's not home very much. Not good, because she leaves him eventually. And then he comes back to his homestead. And, of course, you got the War of 1812. The United States is encroaching on his land. He has to run for cover because there was an arrest warrant for him. And they were for high treason against the Americans and stuff. So he had to escape. He got on his horse and swam across the river, and got away. but by this time he's getting old. He escaped. Believe it or not, he went over to the Indian Bradford, who chopped him in the head, and he lived on some chunk of land that for a while that he gave him. And so even though he was, got chopped in the head by this guy, they had the same cause. So they became, they were still friends, maybe in a business point of way. Anyway, things got back to normal after the War of 1812. Girty was getting old, and he moved, or he went back to his land and became, believe it or not, blind. They say he became blind because he got chopped in the head, and it was starting to affect him. He had issues with torments of rage. There was a lot of mental problems going on with him at the end of his life. And he lived to 1818, believe it or not. So that is the story of Simon Girty. And I got a thing for him. Here's a plaque. They have plaques for him. Born near Harrisburg, Girty crossed cultural boundaries between native and white societies. He was captured and adopted by Seneca Indians in 1756. And upon his release, he settled here with his family. He worked as an interpreter for the British and the Americans at Fort Pitt. In 1778, he defected to the British, serving as an advisor. He accompanied Indians in raids on the frontier settlements. He remains controversial and is buried in Canada. Now, all the things I read about this guy, they really didn't get into depth. So like I said, I wanted to tell you the story of Simon Girty, because even in all the stuff I looked up, it's just very vague. Girty, like this one saying, he terrorized the white settlers and peddled scalps to the British for $10 a piece. And yes, he probably did all that stuff. But here, this little article, this is all they say about him. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. I mean, so this guy who knew all these people went on all these fights and raids and stuff, and this is the only little bit you're ever going to talk about this guy? You ain't going to
Yeah.
talk chopped in the head. Doesn't say anything about getting chopped in the head.
Oh,
You know,
really?
no, it doesn't.
So the book, the old book that you have is more accurate.
Well, the old book I have doesn't even talk about him getting chopped in the head. After the Crawford story, it kind of just ends.
Oh, really?
Yes, really. So, like I said, I had to really dig deep to find the chopped in the head story. I had to dig deep to, find about these battles. I mean, he was in some of the biggest battles against the Americans there are. I mean, it was battle after battle. In 1790, he was at Joshua, Joshua. I don't even. This is the wrong one. I wrote down. He was on the siege of Fort Henry, the siege of Fort Lawrence, the ambush on Conway. He was in battle after battle. Dunmore's War, you name it, he was there. Knew all these guys like Logan, Bradford, Chief, what was that? Colonel, Chief Pipe, Colonel Pipe, the chief. And I do have a picture.
Pipe, isn't that what you said?
That's it, yeah. I got a picture of Captain Pike here. Pipe, not Pike. And this is Captain Pike.
So some of them, by that time, some of them Indians, they had horses. So one of the things,
Yes,
right?
they did have horses.
Right. So my point is that here he is riding along through the.
This is Captain Pike. Pipe. This is the picture they gave you of Captain Pike. And I mean, he's really decked out. There's another picture. He got two pictures, believe it or not. And this is him and the other picture of Captain Pipe. Captain Pipe. I mean, look at he is quite.
Look at the headdress.
Yeah, look at that. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go for looks. I mean, I wish this was in color, but quite decked out. Like I said, he knew people. He was raised by the Seneca, the Iroquois, the Delawares. He spent a lot of time with the Wyandots, the Mingos. Can you imagine hanging out with this guy? Oh my gosh. I mean, it would be crazy. But yeah, there was horses back then. Not like the Plains Indians, they did have horses, but they had a lot of woodland too. The Indians could hide behind trees there.
My point about having the horses is that as a scout that spoke many different languages, he would be a runner. He'd be up and down the line, because he could speak with the other tribes and make sure that, everybody knew what was going down, And so he was probably traveling a lot on horseback to the different tribes during these different altercations.
Yes.
So, but anyway, what made him valuable? Because he was riding around and touching base with all these other folks, and that's another reason why he knew so many people. So, as a scout and an interpreter, and because he had to go and speak with all these other folks, during their, so I can just imagine. He knew about everybody.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And besides that, he was long lived too. It wasn't like he was only 20 or 30. I mean, he lived to like 77, and he's born in 1841. So by the time he was fighting in these wars in like the 1880s, he was already 40 years old. He'd been around the block when most people. You were dying by your time you're 50 or 60. You're wore out. You're dead. You got killed. You got in some disease or sickness and died off. You know what I mean? People didn't live that long. 40 or 50, you're old.
Also, at 44 and not dead yet, he also had a lot of knowledge.
Yes.
I mean, because back then, if you lived till 44 and you're, living as a pioneer, you know how to do stuff, and you know where things are, and because he had traveled between the different wars and the different forts, you know, he knew where the trails were, and he knew stuff along the way and settlements or whatever, So he had acquired knowledge
He
simply
did.
because he was 44 years old, you know.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. And just because he was older, like I said, you're getting in them days, you're getting older. I mean, think about, 50 or 60, he'd been everywhere. I mean, he lived to 77 for God's sake. So even yeah, it said he wanted to fight in the War of 1812, but they just told him, "You're too old. Go home."
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. F. Kitty says an adult at 13 to 16. Yes, definitely. Yeah, and then he served as an interpreter after being taken hostage by one of the mother was taken by the Senecas. Yeah, no, his mother was killed and scalped with the stepfather. The mother, during that raid, they captured the fort. They killed the mother, they killed the father, and they scalped them. And I told you about Father Turner, his stepfather. What a brutal death. Ugh,
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to read the Crawford story because I listened to some podcasts out there today, and they got to the Crawford story, and they just stopped short and said, "Yeah, he was tortured." And I'm thinking, no, he wasn't just tortured. He was tortured beyond belief. I mean, when you cut somebody's scalp off, you burn their body from their neck to their feet, make them walk on hot coals, and then when they don't have a scalp, you take hot coals and pour it on top of their head. That's, I mean, I can't even comprehend. I mean, at that point, he was literally a walking zombie. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine the torture that guy went through. I mean, it just makes me sick to my stomach to think of it. I mean, I don't think any of us can really imagine what that's like. Really.
And one of the interesting things, it's the women and children participated.
Yes.
It was like a family affair. It's like, hey, let's go torture this guy. I mean, I could not imagine, even when I was a child, I could not imagine, somebody was, picking on a dog or something, I was like, no, 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 no. I couldn't stand it. So I can't imagine, saying, oh, look, let's go torture the white guy. Well, it didn't matter. They tortured all kinds of folks. It just depended on who they were and what they did,
Yep.
But aren't you glad that we don't have that kind of sentiment these days?
Yes.
I would, there is still torture going on the planet, but we've sort of calmed down mostly, because back then it was more common than not.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yep, I agree. Today's torture is not, the torture. I can't even imagine. I imagine they got different tortures now, but like you remember when they had the.
Our tortures now are psychological.
Oh yeah. Well, remember when they made a big deal about waterboarding?
Yep.
And they were like, oh, waterboarding, blah 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 blah, and it's like, oh well, yeah, okay, but well, and then you look at this and you go, holy cow, that's nothing compared to what this guy went through. And then can you imagine being the Dr. Knight sitting there, and then Gertie comes up and says, that's what's going to happen to you tomorrow. And you think, okay, how can I kill myself before tomorrow? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, just shoot me now.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's going to happen to me tomorrow. Where is there a sharp stick here? You got a knife? I will slit my own throat. I don't want to endure that. That is just craziness. I don't want to be stripped naked, run through hot coals, have them burn me, shoot me over 100 times, cut my scalp off and pour hot coals over my head, chop my ears off and make me walk around. I mean, think of your ears are chopped off and you can't even go like this, or blood just, oh my God, I can't. I mean, just pinching my ear hurts.
I know. We're talking about it.
Yeah, I just.
Yes, it was gross. I could imagine. Give me a stick, I'll poke myself in the neck.
Yeah.
Anything to not have to go through something like that.
Absolutely.
So what made him? So what was the deal that made him famous?
Gertie?
Yeah.
Well, what made him famous is this Crawford incident. That's why I kind of read that story, is because he was known as this renegade, this evil guy for a long time, because this story, once it got out, it was known because he didn't stop it. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. He could have talked. People were, was probably saying he could have talked to the Indians. He could have done this. He could have done. No, he couldn't. The Indians were set on taking their frustrations out on somebody.
They would have, if Gertie would have objected too much, he would have been part of it too.
Yes, he would. And he didn't want to die for this guy. Nope. Remember, Gertie wanted to marry his daughter, and he told him, "You're a loser. Get the heck out of here." No.
Right.
I mean, so in a way, I think he had this thing like, hey, he's not my favorite guy. I did speak up and I talked to the chief and I said, come on, maybe we should just let him go. And the chief was like, well, we will if you take his place. And no, I'm not taking his place.
Didn't you say it was 90 something odd Indians that were massacred?
Yes, 92 Indians. Just they didn't know what to do with them, and they were women and children and old men, and they just knocked them in the head, and
yeah,
that was it.
So I mean, I can understand why they were like, nah, he ain't getting away. No. That because, they convicted him of a war crime, basically.
Yes. And they needed that to take out their frustrations. Just like Logan, Logan was, peace with the white man. He was all about peace with the white man till the white man, we've read about Logan on this show many a times, where Logan was like, you've killed every family member I ever had. All my family is dead. There's nobody to mourn for me. And so now I'm going to fight you. Because, what did I did nothing to you. I welcomed the white man into my home. I fed him. I clothed him. I did all these things for the white man. And then you go and kill my family. And now I have nobody. And what do you expect? I mean, I can understand from reading all these books and everything and studying these guys that I can understand why they realized at some point that they were on the extermination list. They realized that the white man was coming and they were going to, wipe them out, and they didn't care. The Indians were to be pushed aside, knocked down, chopped down, whatever it took, and they were going to take your land, and they didn't care about you. And that's a sad thing. Yeah, so that's kind of how it went. I feel bad for him, but hey, there's Chloe. Chloe's in the house. Two Feathers, have my beautiful tribe. Love you all so much. Oh, there you go. And F. Kitty says, if you study history, brutality of war is shocking and shockingly common. That is true. When you get into war, people start doing weird things to get their mentality right or something. You killed my friend, I kill you. An eye for an eye, kind of thing. So,
And they go crazy. I mean,
yes.
folks just go crazy. Some of the things, a lot of old timers that I knew back in the day talked about, some of the things that the Germans did, like, it was the Malmedy massacre in France, where
Yeah.
they killed, I don't know, several, it was like 40, 50, 60 GIs and just left them in the snow. And a couple of folks, survived to tell the story and everything. I read the book back in high school, when I was about 14 years old, and it was tragic, And then I knew the owner of the carnival that I worked for. He was in the Battle of the Bulge and had been in Malmedy. He's like, he said, yeah, they were lined up in the snow and frozen, and he said it was horrible, and it's like, I can't imagine. And the Battle of the Bulge, if anybody does any, history at all, it was bad on both sides. But what the men on both sides went through, one of the coldest winters. But anyway, I don't want to get off track. But it's the torture of war, I guess, is where I was headed with that. The things that men do. Well, we can't take any prisoners. What are we going to do? Well, just machine gun them. Well, what are we going to do with these Indians? Well, we'll just club them in the head, And so it doesn't seem, I mean, World War II wasn't that far away. But then there was the Vietnam War, where there was a lot of weird stuff going on in the jungle, with bungee sticks and all kinds of pointed things that would jump out at you from the jungle and kill you. All different kinds of methods to kill people.
Yeah.
And, even today, they got landmines that'll, that do this and that and all kinds of smart bombs.
That is true. That is true. Anyway,
I wish we'd quit fighting.
I do too. Pray for peace.
But anyway,
right?
sorry, I got off on a slight tangent there.
No,
but
well, what do you?
I guess it just goes to show that we've modified our behavior some, but we still have a savage side. I can't imagine, let's all go to war. Let's all go kill something. Let's all, I'm not there. I'll defend my property. I'll defend my land. I'll defend my country. But here.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Okay, well, what do you got for stories tonight?
Oh, we're in the story time now. Hey,
yeah. Let's get off the death and we got to get off the death and destruction and think of more happier things.
Yep, it's just a shame that we haven't learned more after all these years. But I keep praying and keep asking the Creator to step in and maybe bring a little wisdom to some of these people. So, but our first story for tonight, ladies and gentlemen, hobos and tramps, and cross-eyed mosquitoes and bow-legged ants. Our first story for tonight is the Feast of the Whirlwinds. And our characters are the little people, the Ancient of Bears, Dagoanoyan, whirlwind or cyclone, always represented as flying heads without bodies. Now, if they're flying heads, I would assume that they don't have bodies, but anyway. So, just Geo and his uncle lived together in the woods. When the boy was old enough, his uncle taught him how to shoot and took him out hunting. Hang on a sec. I have to find my cursor. I lost it. Please excuse the slight delay. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you very much. Let me start over. Dizogio and his uncle lived together in the woods. When the boy was old enough, his uncle taught him how to shoot and took him out hunting. One day, while the young man was following an elk, a woman called to him, "Come here and rest. You are tired." At first, he paid no heed to the woman's words, but when she called the third time, he sat down at her side. She talked to him and soon had his head on her lap. She began to search in his hair, and right away he was asleep. When the woman was satisfied that the young man slept soundly, she put him in a basket, put the basket on her back, and started off with great swiftness. She traveled till sunset, then she stopped, put down the basket, roused the young man, and asked, "Do you know this place?" "I know it," said he. "My uncle and I used to hunt here." They spent the night there. The next morning, the woman searched in Dizogio's hair till he fell asleep. Then she put him in the basket and hurried on. Late in the afternoon, she stopped near the lake, put the basket down, shook the young man, and asked, "Do you know this lake?" "I know it. I have been here with my uncle." The woman took out of her basket a canoe no larger than a walnut, struck it till it became large, then both sat in it, and the woman paddled across the lake. "We will go home now," said she. "I have a mother and I have 3 sisters married and living in my mother's cabin." The two traveled on till they came to the cabin. When they stood at the door and the mother saw a stranger with her daughter, she called out, "Welcome, son-in-law. I am glad you have come." Dizogio became the young woman's husband, and they lived on happily till one night the old woman had a dream. She rolled on the floor into the edge of the fire. Her son-in-law jumped up and asked, "What is the matter, mother-in-law? Are you dreaming?" She didn't answer, but rolled around muttering to herself. Then she said, "I'll make her talk." And taking a corn pounder, he hit her a blow on the head. She stood up then and said, "Oh, I've had a bad dream. I dreamed that my son-in-law killed Nawakahi." "I'll do that in the morning," said the young man, "but go to sleep now." The next morning, Dizogio killed the bear without much trouble and carried it home. That night, the old woman dreamed that her son-in-law must make a feast for the Dagwainoyens, whirlwinds, invited them to it, and provided so much food they couldn't eat it all. The next day, Dizogio killed a great many elks, deer, and bears. There was an abundance of meat. The house was full of it, and still there was more. Then the young man went out and called to the whirlwinds to come to a feast prepared for them. They answered quickly, and all promised to come. They came in such numbers that there wasn't room for them on the shelves, the floor, or the seats. They began to eat, and they ate with a terrible appetite. The mother-in-law went around urging them, saying, "Eat, eat your fill. I want everyone to have plenty." They ate, and the old woman still urged, hoping the supply would give out and her son-in-law would be killed. The young man with his wife and her three sisters and their husbands went for more food in case of need. The whirlwinds ate till their jaws couldn't move. "We have enough, mother, enough," said they. When Dozagio heard these words, he motioned to the walls and the roof of the cabin and said, "I want your roof and walls to become stone." The old woman and the flying heads, finding that they were in a stone house and couldn't get out, flew around in every direction. The mother-in-law begged for mercy. "You had no mercy on me," said her son-in-law. Then he said, "I want this house to be red hot." As the house grew hot, the heads flew about with terrible speed, knocking against the walls and making such a noise as had never been heard in the world before. But at last all was still. Then Dizogio, with his wife, her three sisters, and their husbands, set out for his uncle's cabin. When they reached the lake, it was covered with ice, so thin that it would barely hold up a small bird. The young man took 8 puffballs from an oak tree, made himself and his friends small, and each one entered a puffball. When the 8 balls stood side by side on the ice at the edge of the lake, the young man said, "Let the west wind blow." The west wind came and swept the balls over the lake. Dizogio and his friends sprang out of the balls, became of natural size, and went on their way till they came to the uncle's cabin. The end. Now, our next story for tonight is, do we have time?
Well, yeah, of course we got time. Let me pull it up. Here we go. This is the one?
It's just the next one. Thunder destroys horned snake.
Okay. Here we go.
No, I don't know how long this one is. So, but anyway, but here we go. Let me get a little something to drink here and get my throat. Whoops. Oh no. Hang on a sec. That's interesting. Hang on a second. I was getting the cards ready to pull. and I dropped them all over the floor down here. So just give me a half second. I guess that's 2 or 3 seconds now, ain't it? Liar, liar, pants on fire. There we go. Okay. Our next story. Thunder destroys horned snake. Thonogaeus, the snake, long horns, and Hino, thunder. A mother and daughter lived in a bark house on the edge of a village. Many men wanted the girl for a wife, for she was nice looking. But to each man she said, "You are not such a man as I want." One day the girl and her mother went to the forest to pick up wood. When it began to grow dark, they were far from home. The mother said, "We'll make a fire and stay here all night." They made a fire and got ready for the night. All at once a man stood near the girl. When she looked up, she was amazed. He was so handsome. He had a wampum belt around his body and long feathers in his headdress. He said to her, "I have come to marry you." Her mother was around picking up wood. The girl said, "I will tell my mother." The young man stood by the fire and waited for the girl's answer. When she told her mother that a stranger had come and wanted to marry her, the mother said, "You have refused many good men. Now do as you like." The girl gave the man her mother's answer and said, "I will be your wife." "You must go home with me," said the man, and taking off his wampum belt, he gave it to the mother and said, "This will be a proof that we are married." The woman hung the belt on a tree. She was greatly pleased with her new son-in-law. The two started off together. They soon reached a large clearing, at one end of which was a house. The man said, "That is our home." When they went into the house, the persons sitting around seemed to be pleased with the young woman. She was contented and happy till one day her husband said, "I am going out to hunt." He went out, and as he closed the door, she heard a strange noise. Then all was silent. Towards dark, she heard the same noise. The door opened, and a great snake came in. It put its head on the woman's lap and told her to look for vermin. She found bloodsuckers and angleworms, as well as insects. After a while, the snake backed out of the door. The next minute, the husband came in, as handsome as ever. "Were you afraid of me?" asked he. "I wasn't afraid," said the young woman. The next day, the man went to hunt. When he closed the door, the woman heard the same kind of noise she had heard the day before. And when she went out to gather wood, she saw a great snake sunning itself on the rocks. Then she saw another and another, and she began to be very homesick. About dark, her husband came as he had the evening before. The next day, after he had gone, she began to think about getting away from such a terrible man. She went for wood, and while standing in one place thinking, she heard a voice, and turning toward it, saw an old man. He said, "My grandchild, you are unfortunate. The man you are living with is a bad man. We have often tried to kill him, but he is cautious. We can't catch him. There are 7 brothers. Your husband is the youngest. Their hearts are tied together in a bunch, and the bunch is hidden under his couch. You must get it. I and my friends will help you all we can." The young woman found the hearts, hid them under her blanket, and hurrying out of the house began to run. Soon she heard a voice calling, "Stop! Come back!" But she ran the faster. The voice said, "You can't get away no matter how you try." Then strength seemed to leave her. But that minute, the stranger who had called her grandchild was at her side. "I will help you," said he, and taking hold of her blanket, he pulled her out of the water. She saw then that she'd been in a lake. A great black cloud was above them, and thunder began to shoot its arrows. Soon the woman saw that the stranger had killed the terrible snake. Other men, like him, were on the shore, and they thanked her and said that she had helped them. The men drew the snake out of the lake, cut it into pieces, and stuck the head on a pole. Seeing that the eyes looked at the woman in a sharp, ugly way, the grandfather said, "You must come home with us." They packed pieces of the snake in separate bundles. Then each man took a bundle, and they started. After a while, they came to what seemed to the woman to be a house. Inside the house was a very old man. The leader said to him, "This young woman has helped us to kill the great snake." The old man looked up and said, "My granddaughter, I thank you." All the men, except the very old man, hunted, but each day they brought the woman corn and squash, for she couldn't eat their kind of food. They told the names of the persons for whom they stole the corn and squash, and she knew those persons. One day the old man said to the others, "Maybe you had better take the woman with you. She has power." They said, "Very well." And then they told her that one of their number was missing, and said, "On a rock in a deep water is a terrible bloodsucker. The man shot at him, but he wasn't quick enough, and the bloodsucker caught him. Our friend lies there on the rock, and we can't rescue him or kill the bloodsucker." She went with them to the lake. When they came to where the rock was, she looked down and saw the bloodsucker. The men tried to kill the bloodsucker by going up to the clouds and shooting arrows down into the water. When each man had tried and failed, they asked the woman to shoot. She shot once. The bloodsucker moved. She shot a second time. There was a terrible struggle in the water. Then all was quiet. Soon they saw that the bloodsucker was dead, and their friend was free. The man came out of the water, and they all went home. After the woman had been with these men about a year, the old man Thunder said, "It is time for this woman to go to her mother." And he said to her, "For 10 days, You mustn't do any work, any pounding, or any chopping. The thunders went with her till she was near home. She thought they walked along as ordinary persons. When they left her, she saw that she was standing in water. A heavy shower had just passed over. Her mother's house was close by. For 8 days, she refused to work. The ninth day, her mother and friends urged her to help them pound corn. She said that she couldn't, but they urged so hard that she took the pounder and struck one blow. The mortar split apart and the corn fell on the ground. Such was her terrible strength. Talk about a cold ending.
Yeah, it's kind of fast, didn't it? It was just kind of.
That was talk about a cold ending.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Well, the border split apart. Around such as her. Yeah. Yeah. It's like
I was like looking for the next paragraph, you know.
Yeah,
Is it on the next page? Nope, there's another story down there. But anyway, I wonder why she was supposed to, not work for 10 days. You mustn't do any work, any pounding or chopping. I wonder what the deal was. Because they caught her on the ninth day, you know?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just kind of. Yeah, makes you wonder.
When I first
feels like there's something missing.
Yeah, when I first read the beginning of this story, I was reminded about one of the snake stories, and basically, this one was also about transformation, and because the story that that I have told for many times was there was a young brave that was by the spring, and the young girl would go to the spring every day and see this young man, and he'd say, well, I mean every night, but every day when she went down to the spring to get water, she saw this large snake, and so and she was afraid of the snake at first, but then realized when she looked at its eyes that something was different. And then at night she'd go back down there, and there was this handsome brave. And so they got together, and he took her to his home with all the other snakes. He took her to his clan, and they accepted her. So it was one of them times where the two clans got together, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
That's where lizard people first began.
That's right. The lizard people.
Well, snaky lizardy,
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the Senecas have that same similar story, but with more to it, that he was killed and blah blah blah. So that's interesting.
Yep. So what do we got for cards tonight?
Tonight we got this gentleman right here, the squirrel.
Oops, wrong one.
Squirrel. Number 26.
Trying to make that bigger, but it just didn't work. Click the wrong button.
Oops.
Yeah.
Hang on. 26. Getting a little squirrely. Squirrel is gathering. Squirrel, you have gathered nuts by the score. Exacting, predicting if you'll need more. Teach me to take no more than I need, trusting great mystery to harvest the seed. Squirrel teaches you to plan ahead for the winter when the trees are bare and the nuts have long since disappeared. Well, we're coming out of winter and coming into spring. I know that you folks up in the northern climes are having snowstorms. That's a shame. Squirrel medicine can come in many forms, as this furry critter is very diverse in nature. The erratic behavior of squirrel has bested many a forlorn hunter, and it thus stands to reason that there are benefits to being able to circle a branch at lightning speed. This erratic behavior of squirrel can also get nerve-wracking if you are dealing with persons who have squirrel medicine. It's squirrely. Trying to calm them down enough to accomplish something may drive you nuts. The gathering power of squirrel medicine is a great gift. It teaches you how to gather and store your energy for times of need. It teaches you to reserve something for future use, whether it be a judgment, an opinion, a savings account, candles, or extra food. To put it in a nutshell, squirrel is the Boy Scout of the animal kingdom. Always be prepared. Now, it teaches you to gather and store your energy for times of need. Now, that's important, y'all. Carry that forward, okay? If squirrel is curried into your cards today, it may be that you are being told to honor your future by readying yourself for change. Now we all know that there's all kinds of change in our forecast. You know, stuff is changing all the time. So it may be that you are being told to honor your future. Just think about that. By readying yourself for change. You know changes are coming, so rather than get angry and upset, just changes are coming. The message could be to lighten your load if you've gathered too many things that do not serve you. Think about that. And we've talked about this before when squirrel card has been pulled. If you've got a bunch of junk laying around like I do, I've been getting rid of stuff. And we need to lighten our load inside our heads and hearts too. It ain't just material things. These things can include thoughts, worries, pressures, streets, or gadgets. So there are a lot of folks who have, worries that they're carrying with them. And, one thing that they need to do is they need to ungather them suckers and get rid of them. So squirrel has another lesson which can aid you if you observe what is obvious and which can prepare you for anything. It has to do with the safe place in which you put your gatherings. This safe place is an untroubled heart and mind, and that which is gathered to put in this place is wisdom and caring. I got to read that over again. This safe place is an untroubled heart and mind, and that which is gathered to put in this place is wisdom and caring. The energies gathered will set your mind and your heart free so that you will know that all will be taken care of in its own time. Apply this to your fears about the future and they will vanish. Now, this card was sideways, okay? So I don't know if it was straight up or down. So I'm going to read part of the contrary. The contrary medicine of squirrel is the hoarder, a fearful person who expects the worst and is stuck in waiting. Now, there are a lot of folks out there because all this war and, and the Armageddon and all this stuff. So, they're fearful that the worst, and they're stuck in waiting. Waiting for something to happen is a trap. No action equals stagnation. But a little of squirrel's erratic energy might get things moving. If squirrel is hanging upside down on your branch, you may have begun seeing the world through opposites, hoarding your thoughts of abundance. Hoarding your thoughts of abundance. Think about that. So that fear of scarcity takes hold. So you worry yourself so much that things are going to be bad and there's not going to be enough. And then lo and behold, ding, you end up in that way. So you may ask yourself, have I denied my ability to produce enough space for abundance to enter my life? In other words, you keep your heart closed. You can't accept things. Have I denied my connection to the Earth Mother, from which all things flow? In moving too fast, have I taken on the erratic nature of squirrel without having any focus? I know that I get into that situation where, since I can do anything I want because I don't have a job or whatever, it's erratic. I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do today. And then I end up not doing anything. So, and moving too fast, there's an erratic nature without having any focus. Well, I can't speak for moving too fast, but I can speak for the erratic nature. My brain works too fast. So there's squirrel. I hope that you have gotten something out of that. That's an interesting card for tonight, and for today. If we pulled this card, you may be told to honor your future by readying yourself for change. I think that's an important message. Mm-hmm. Now, we do have another card if we got time, and it's Beefalo.
What?
Buffalo.
Oh, I was saying Beefalo. I don't think we ever had a Beefalo.
Beefalo. Ooh, 19. I went too far. Nah, I'm just being crazy.
Okay.
As an old man, I had that right to be a little crazy once in a while. Right. But here, how about this? Huh. Buffalo is prayer and abundance.
Ooh.
And we just had squirrel, that in my humble opinion, they're leaked. Let me let the dog out because he's just going crazy and he's bothering me.
Well, we won't bet. A second. Oh yeah, that's right. I know. I don't let my dogs in, out, whatever. Boy, there's always something going on. Them dogs just take up your time. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying the stories and the card for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Mary Wins, Scotty Boy, Chloe. Chloe, you must be back from work. Let's see who else is in here. Mark the Spark Arc, or Mark Dark Spark. Oh, I get it all. But anyhow, but thank you all for joining in the chat and watching the story and listening to all my wise words about the past and what did we learn from it all. Well, I don't know what you learned from Simon Gertie, but quite the adventure. Anyway.
We tried to do the right thing from the very beginning. You know,
That's
which
right.
is a shame they turned him down. But anyway, buffalo, number
Oh,
19 in the book, it's prayer and abundance. Buffalo, you bring us the gifts of life. Here are prayers with smoke rising. Like the phoenix, we are reborn within the sacred words. In the Lakota tradition, it was the white buffalo calf woman who brought the sacred pipe to the people and taught them to pray. The bowl of the pipe was the receptacle that held tobacco and herb with male and female medicine. The stem of the pipe represented the male entering the female and seeding life. In the coming together of male and female, the connection to the divine energy of the Great Spirit was made. As the pipe was loaded with tobacco, every family in nature was asked to enter into the pipe and share its medicine as prayer and praise to the heavens. The smoke was considered to be visual prayer and was very sacred and cleansing. All animals are sacred, but in many traditions, white buffalo is the most sacred. Buffalo was the major source of sustenance for the Plains Indians. It gave meat for food and hide for clothing, warm and soft buffalo robes for long winters, and hooves for glue. The medicine of buffalo is prayer, gratitude, and praise for that which has been received. I'm going to read it again. The medicine of buffalo is prayer, gratitude, and praise for that which has been received. Buffalo medicine is also knowing that abundance is present when all relations are honored as sacred. Now, what do we know about all relations? That means everything. That means all the animals, all the trees, all the rocks, minerals, all relations, everything, when they're honored as sacred. And when gratitude is expressed to every living part of creation. Because of its desire to give the gifts that its body provided, and because of its willingness to be used on earth for the highest good before entering the hunting grounds of spirit. Buffalo did not readily stampede and run from hunters. To use buffalo medicine is to smoke the pipe in a sacred manner and to give praise for the richness of life that it has shared. Buffalo medicine is a sign that you achieve nothing without the aid of the Great Spirit, and that you must be humble enough to ask for that assistance and then be grateful for what you receive. Now I got 3 cards here, and the next one is Rabbit. And Rabbit is all about fear. And there are a lot of things about Rabbit. Let's see, number 30, which is interesting. So Squirrel is telling you to gather together those things, and Buffalo is giving you abundance. And Rabbit is going to tell you not to live in fear. Because Rabbit is all about fear. That is it, fear. Sacred little rabbit, please drop your fright. Running doesn't stop the pain or turn the dark to light. So now there's a long story here I won't read about how Rabbit and a friend of his who happened to be a witch, they weren't friends anymore. And basically she cursed him. And she said, "You will live in fear, and all of your descendants." She cursed him. And so let me pick up where that part is. Uh, from now on, you will call your fears, and your fears will come to you. Now, Rabbit is the fear caller. He goes out and shouts, Eagle, I am so afraid of you. If Eagle doesn't hear him, Rabbit calls a little louder. Eagle, stay away from me. Eagle, now hearing Rabbit, comes and eats him. Rabbit calls bobcats, wolves, coyote, and even snakes until they come. As the story shows, rabbit medicine people are so afraid of tragedy and illness and disaster and being taken that they call these very fears to them to teach them lessons. The keynote here is what you resist will persist. So, squirrels telling you to make room for stuff, and you got all kinds of abundance with buffalo. And I would say what you fear most is what you will become. So don't be afraid of the future. I think that's what Rabbit's telling us. Here is the lesson. If you pulled Rabbit, stop talking about horrible things, which people are doing right now, and get rid of what if in your vocabulary. This card may signal a time of worry about the future or of trying to exercise your control over that which you is not yet in form. We worry about things that have not even begun yet. Oh my God, what if this happens? Yeah. We got to stop that. And folks got to stop that. Or trying to exercise your control over that which is not yet in form, the future. Stop now. Write your fears down and be willing to feel them. Breathe into them and feel them running through your body into Mother Earth as a giveaway. In other words, get rid of that stuff. So y'all be careful out there. I think those are 3 good cards. So Rabbit, telling you, please don't be afraid. Don't be calling fears to you. Really, there are so many people talking about Armageddon, and I will mention this one other thing. Folks are talking about all these things that are going to happen when the eclipse comes. We've had so many eclipses on this planet. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just old and crotchety, but I don't think there's anything going to happen except there's going to be parts of the United States that are going to be in shade for 4.5 minutes, all this other stuff. And people are trying to sell fear. Oh, the devil's going to come and all these other righteous things, and Armageddon is going to come. These people are going to call this stuff to them. They're begging for these things to happen. Stop it. That's what Rabbit card is saying. Stop it.
I know. They were saying that today they were talking about how, it's going to affect the trucking industry. Your cell phones might not work. They're going to shut and lock all the prisoners down. The zoos are going to be affected. Your animals, you better lock them in the house because things might happen. I'm thinking, what the fudge are you talking? When did this happen? I don't get it. So our cell phones are going to be affected by the eclipse? I don't get it.
And here's the thing. We've had these kind of scare tactics before, we just have. And it's I used to be in that category where, oh my God, we're all going to die. But, now I look at stuff and I go, cut it out. Yeah. They literally are selling fear. And it's interesting that the Rabbit card showed up to warn us, don't be calling fear to you. But I've been on this thing for a little while anyway, that, people, they want Armageddon to happen.
They
They
do.
absolutely, Armageddon has to happen in order for their plans to come to fruition. The Bible has to, the prophecies have to be proven in order for them to get whatever they think they need.
Well,
It's stupid.
they talk
They're,
about it enough, will manifest that kind of reality. We shouldn't be manifesting that kind of reality.
no, or worrying about it and quit calling fear to it,
Yeah.
and be like squirrel and, get rid of those things we don't need, which guess what? Are those kind of fears and things. We need to get rid of them and make room for Buffalo, who's full of abundance, Yeah, buddy, quit worrying about this stuff, especially when we can't do anything about it. If these folks, like they were talking about the red heifer thingy,
Yeah.
the Jews going to sacrifice, so they do. Oh my God, they're going to kill a cow, oh my God, but it means what? They killed a
Yeah.
cow. Oh, but the altar and the thingy and the, okay, we'll see,
Mhm.
but they want to scare everybody literally to death.
Yep.
People are having ulcers, and I've talked with some folks, and they're just literally scared to death. And it's like,
Ah,
oh man,
yeah.
come on now. So anyway, I'm going to shut up about that. But the squirrel, gather what you need and get rid of the rest, so that you can make room for Buffalo's abundance. Keep that in your heart. There is nothing wrong with that message. And
Nope.
Rabbit says, don't call fear to you. That's a biggie right there. So I love you, my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Peachy Queen, Mark the Arc Spark, Mary Wins. Let's see, who else do we have? Scotty Boy, Alexander the God of Shamans in the house tonight. Thank you all. Chloe, thank you. F Kitty, Off the Hook. We had a great crowd tonight. I think we got like 20 people here tonight. Max Vision, Remote View, Lucky Stone, a whole bunch of you. Thank you all for being here tonight. We had a great time. If you missed the beginning, go back and listen to the stuff I had about Simon Gertie, crazy story about him and all the things he did. And, I banded up with the Indians and fought against the Americans, of all things. Quite the plot twist there. But with that, thank you for the great stories. That was wonderful, and the good card picks and what they mean. It really fits our situation we live in today. There's Seeker of Truth too. Thank you for joining us tonight. She says, "Thank you, guys." Okay, well, with that, don't forget to join me on Saturday night, where we will be talking about, what do you think of all things, the eclipse. If we're still around to enjoy it, because the eclipse is coming, and we might all disappear. We'll be raptured up, or something crazy like that will happen. We don't know, but tune in Saturday night, where crazy things we'll be talking about them. Anyway, in the meantime,
Do you know what an eclipse is? I mean, it's just a new moon.
Yeah, I know.
It's a new moon that gets in front of the sun. It's a new moon.
They're calling out the National Guard. They're calling out the National Guard.
we have a new moon every month. Every 28 and a half days, we have a new moon. I'm like, what is the big deal here? So, but if something tragic happens, I think if something weird happens, somebody's planning it so they can scare everybody.
Absolutely.
They're trying to get everybody to manifest something scary. So don't buy into it. Oh, we're going to have 4.5 minutes of dark, Yay, team! Man, take a picture. Woo, and it'll be over with.
Exactly. Go back to
Don't
your
worry
normal
about
life.
it.
Don't worry about it. And so
But
don't
if
let
something
yourself
does happen, I'll eat my shorts.
don't be scared by the fear and control matrix. Go out, say hi to your neighbor, do something nice for somebody. Remember, don't let fear creep into your life. Be fearless. And like Mary says all the time, love, find the way. Love will find the way. Mary, you got it right on. Remember, everybody, be the frequency you want to receive. Everyone, love y'all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.